I do want to warn you before you watch, the chapters, or listen, however. My hair continually gets worse, but I do hope you like and subscribe this video. Yeah, it would really help me grow. And if you have any book recommendations, or if I say a word wrong and you want me to say it right, if it appears more in the book, just leave it down in the comments. If I am able to turn them on, I turned them on in my last video, but I don't know what happened in the first chapter. But yeah, if I just say something wrong, just correct me, and that's about it. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. All that year, the animals worked like slaves, but they were happy in their work. They grudged no effort or sacrifice. Well aware that evening that they did was for benefit of themselves and for those of their kind who would come after them, but not for the paddle of idle thieving human beings. Throughout the spring and summer, they worked a 60-hour week, and in August, Napoleon announced that there would be work on Sunday afternoons as well. This work was strictly voluntarily, but any animal who absented himself from it would have his rations reduced by half. Even so, it was found necessary to leave certain tasks underdone. The harvest was a little less successful than the previous year, and the 2 fields which should have been sown with roots in the early summer was not sown because the plowing had not been completed early enough. It was possible to foresee the coming winter would be a hard one. The windmill presented unexpected difficulties. There was good quarry of limestone on the farm, and plenty of sand and cement had been found in one of the outhouses, so that all the materials for building were at hand. But the problem the animals could not at first solve was how to break up the stone into pieces of substitutable size. There seemed to be no way of doing this except with picks and crowbars, which no animal could use, because no animal could stand on its hind legs. Only after weeks of effort in vain did the right idea occur to somebody, namely, to utilize the force of gravity. Huge boulders, far too big to be used, as they were lying all over the bed and quarry. The animals lashed ropes around these, and then altogether the cows, horses, and sheep, any animal that could lay hold of the rope, even the pigs sometimes joined at the critical moments. They dragged them with desperate slowness up to the slope at the top of the quarry. Then they were toppled over the edge to shatter the pieces below. Transporting the stone, which was once broken, was comparatively simple. Sorry about the hair again. I really took a break and I didn't do anything, but it looks like it got worse. Anyway, carried it off in the cartloads. The sheep dragged single blocks. Even Merle and Benjamin yoked themselves into the old governess cart, and they did their share. By late summer, a sufficient store of stone had accumulated, and then the pigs began building under the superintendence of the superintendents of the pigs. But it was slow, laborious process. Frequently, it took a whole day of exhausting effort to drag a single boulder to the top of the quarry, and sometimes, when it was pushed over the edge, it failed to break. Nothing could have been achieved without Boxer, whose strength seemed to equal that of the rest of the animals put together. When the boulder began to slip, and the animals cried out in despair at finding themselves dragged down the hill, it was always Boxer who strained himself against the rope and brought the boulder to a stop. To see him strolling up the slope inch by inch, his breath coming fast, the tips of his hoofs clawing at the ground, and his great sizes, mad with sweat, filled everyone with admiration. Clover warned him sometimes to be careful not to overstrain himself, but Boxer would never listen to her. His 2 slogans, "I will work harder" and "Napoleon is always right," seemed to be sufficient answer to all his problems. He had made arrangements with the cockerel to call him 3/4 of an hour earlier in the morning, of half an hour, and this in his spare moments, of which he were not many nowadays. He would go alone to the quarry, collect a load of broken stone, and drag it down to the side of the hidewell unassisted. The animals were not badly off throughout that summer, in spite of the hardness of their work. If they had no more food than they had in Jones's day, at least they did not have less. The advantage of only having to feed themselves and not having to support 5 extravagant human beings as well was so great that it would have taken a lot of failures to outweigh it. And in many ways, the animal method of doing things was more efficient and saved labor. Such jobs as weeding, for instance, was done could be done with a thoroughness impossible to human beings. And again, since no animal now stole, it was unnecessary to fence off pasture from arable land, which saved a lot of labor on the upkeep of hedges and gates. Nevertheless, as the summer wore on, various unforeseen shortages began to make themselves felt. There was a need of plain paraffin oil, snails, string, dog biscuits, and iron for the horses' shoes, none of which could be produced on the farm. Later, there would also be need for seeds and artificial manures, besides various tools, and finally, the machinery for the windmill. How these were to be produced, no one was able to imagine. On Sunday morning, when the animals assembled to receive orders, Napoleon announced that he had decided upon a new policy. From now on, Animal Farm would engage in trade with the neighboring farms, not, of course, for any commercial purposes, but simply in order to maintain the materials which were urgently necessary. The needs of the windmill must override everything else, he said. He was therefore making arrangements to sell a stack of hay and part of the current year's wheat crop, and later on, if money were needed, it would have to be made up by the sale of eggs, for which there was always market in Wellington. Wellington. Oh, I've been saying that wrong this whole time? I'm so sorry. The hens, said Napoleon, should welcome the sacrifice as their own special contribution towards the building of the windmill. Once again, the animals were conscious of a vague uneasiness, never be able to dealing with human beings, never engage in trade. Never to have any dealings with human beings, never to engage in trade, never to make any use of money. Had not these been the earliest resolutions passed at the first triumphant meeting after Joneses was expelled? All the animals remembered passing through such resolutions, or at least they thought they had remembered it. The 4 young pigs who had protested Napoleon abolished the meetings, raised their voices timidly, but they were promptly silenced by tremendous growling from the dogs. Then, as usual, the sheep broke into 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and the momentary awkwardness was smoothed over. Finally, Napoleon raised his trotter for silence and announced that he was already made all the arrangements. There would be no need for any of the animals to come in contact with human beings, which would clearly be most undesirable. He intended to take the whole burden upon his own shoulders. Mr. Whymper, a solicitor living in Wellington, had agreed to act as intermediary between Animal Farm and the outside world, and visit the farm every Monday morning to receive his instructions. Napoleon ended his speech with the usual cry of "Long live Animal Farm," and after the singing of Beasts of England, the animals were dismissed. After Squealer made a round of the farm and set the animals' minds to rest, he assured them that the resolution against engaging in trade and using money had never been passed or even suggested. It was pure imagination, probably traceable in the beginning to lies circulated by Snowball. A few animals still felt faintly doubtful, but Squealer asked them to shrewd, "Are you certain that this is not something that you have dreamed, comrades? Have you any record of such a resolution? Is it written down anywhere?" And it was certain, true, that nothing of the kind existed in writing. The animals were satisfied that they had been mistaken. Every Monday, Mr. Whymper? I'm really not sure how to say his name. If you know how, and if I'm pronouncing oh shoot, I hit that. I'm so sorry. That blew up in your ear. If you hear me mispronounce any words, just leave it down in the comments and how I should say it, and I'll try to say it in the next video if the word comes up again. Every Monday, Mr. Whymper visited the farm as been arranged. He was a sly-looking little man with side whiskers, a solitaire in a very small way of business, but sharp enough to have realized earlier than everyone else that Animal Farm would need a broker, and that the commissions would be worth having. The animals watched this coming and going with a kind of dread, and avoided him as much as possible. Nevertheless, the sight of Napoleon on all fours delivering orders to Whymper, who stood on 2 legs, roused their pride and partly reconciled them to have a new arrangement. The relations with human race were now not quite the same as they had been before. The human beings did not hate Animal Farm any less than that it was prospering. Indeed, they hated it more than ever. Every human being held it as an article of faith that the farm would go bankrupt sooner or later, and above all, that the windmill would be a failure. They would meet in the public houses and prove to one another by means of diagrams that the windmill was bound to fall down, or that if it did stand up, that it would never work. And yet, Against their will, they had developed a certain respect for the efficiency with which the animals were managing their own affairs. One symptom of this was that they had begun to call Animal Farm by its proper name, and ceased to pretend that it was called the Manor Farm. They had also dropped the championship of Jones, who had given up hope of getting his farm back and gone to live in another part of the country. Except through Winebraid, there was no contact between the Animal Farm and the outside world, but there were constant rumors that Napoleon was about to enter into a definite business agreement with either Mr. Plingington or Foxwood or Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield. But never, it was noticed, was both simultaneously. I hope I said that right. I know that word, but I just can't say it right now. Okay. It was about the time that the pigs suddenly moved into the farmhouse and took up their residence there. Again, the animals seemed to remember that the resolution against had been passed into the early days, and again Squealer was able to convince them that this was not the case. It was absolutely necessary, he said, that the pigs, who were in the brains of the farm, should have a quiet place to work in. It was also more suited for the dignity of the leader. For of late he had taken to speaking of Napoleon under the title of leader, to live in the house then in Murray Sty. Nevertheless, some of the animals were disrupted when they heard that the pigs not only took their meals in the kitchen and used the drawing room as a creation room, but also slept in the beds. Boxer passed it off with the usual Napoleon always right, but Clover, who thought she remembered a definite rule against the beds, she went to the end of the barn and tried to puzzle out the 7 commandments which were inscribed there. Finding herself unable to read more than individual letters, she fetched Muriel, she said, read me the 4th commandment. Does it not say something about never sleeping in a bed? With some difficulty, Muriel spelt out, it says, no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. She finally announced. Curiously, though, Clover had not remembered that the 4th commandment mentioned sheet, but also it was there on the wall. It must have done so. And oh my god, I look so creepy. Okay. And Squealer, who happened to be passing by at the moment, attended by 2 or 3 dogs, was able to put the whole matter at its proper perspective. You have heard, then, comrades, he said, that we pigs now sleep in the beds of the farmhouse. And why not? You did not suppose, surely, that there was ever a rule against beds. A bed merely means a place to sleep, and a pile of straw in the stall is a bed. Probably regarded the rule was against sheets, which are a human invention. We have removed the sheets from the farmhouse beds and sleep between blankets in very comfortable beds. They are too. Wait. Let me read that sentence again. And sleep in blanket. Okay. We have removed the sheets from the farmhouse beds and sleep between blankets. And very comfortable beds. They are too. But not more comfortable than we need. I can tell you, comrades, with all the brain work we to do nowadays, you would not rob us of our repose. Would you, comrades? You would not have us tired to carry out our duties. Surely none of you wishes to see Jones back. The animals reassured him that at this point immediately and no more was said about the pigs sleeping in the farmhouse beds. And when some days afterwards it was announced that from now on the pigs would get up an hour later in the mornings, and the other animals, no complaint was made about this either. By autumn, the animals were tired but happy. They had a hard year, and after the sale of part of the hay and corn and the stores of wood for the winter were none too plentiful. But the windmill compensated for everything. It was almost half built now. After the harvest, there were stretches of clear, dry weather, and the animals toiled harder than ever, thinking it was worthwhile to plod to and fro all day with blocks of stone, if by doing so they could raise the walls another foot. Boxer would even come out at nights and work for an hour or two on his own by the light of the harvest moon. In their spare moments, the animals would walk around the half-finished mill, admiring the strength and perpendicularly of its walls, marveling that they should ever have been able to build anything so imposing. Only old Benjamin refused to grow enthusiastic about the windmill, though as usual he would utter nothing beyond the cryptic remark that donkeys live a long time. November came with raging southwest winds. Building had to stop because it was now too wet to mix the cement. Finally there came a night when the gale was so violent that the farm buildings rocked on their foundations and several tiles were blown off the roof of the barn. The hens woke up immediately, squawking with terror because they had dreamed simultaneously of hearing a gun go off in the distance. In the morning, the animals came out of their stalls to find that the flagstaff had been blown down and the elm tree at the foot of the orchard had been plucked up like a radish. They had noticed that this was a cry of despair broke from every animal's throat. A terrible sight had met their eyes. The windmill was in ruins. With one accord, they dashed down to the spot. Napoleon, who seldomly moved out of a walk, raced ahead of all of them. Yes, there it lay, the fruit of all their struggles, leveled to its foundations. The stones they had broken and carried laboriously scattered all around. Unable to speak at first, they stood gazing mournfully at the litter of fallen stone. Napoleon paced to and fro in silence, occasionally snuffing at the ground. His tail had grown rigid and twitched sharply from side to side in him of intense mental activity. Suddenly he halted as his mind were made up. His mind were, yeah, it says were. It says were. Comrades, he said quietly, do you know who is responsible for this? Do you know the enemy who has come in the night and overthrown our windmill? Snowball. He suddenly roared in a voice of thunder. Snowball has done this thing in sheer malignity, thinking to set our plans and avenge himself for his ignominious expulsion. This traitor has crept here under the cover of night and destroyed our work in nearly a year. Comrades, here and now I pronounce the death sentence upon Snowball, animal hero, second class, and half a bushel of apples to any animal who brings him to justice. All bushel to anyone who captures him alive. The animals were shocked beyond measure to learn that even Snowball could be guilty of such an action. There was a cry of indignation, and everyone began thinking out ways to catch Snowball if he should ever come back. Almost immediately, the footprints of a pig were discovered in the grass a little distance from the knoll. They could only be traced for a few yards, but appeared to lead to a hole in the hedge. Napoleon snuffed deeply and pronounced them to be snowballs. He gave it his opinion that Snowball had probably come from the direction of Foxwood Farm. No more delays, comrades, cried Napoleon. When the footprints had been examined, there is work to be done. Every morning we begin rebuilding the windmill, and we build all the way through the winter, rain or shine. We will teach this miserable traitor that he cannot undo our work so easily. Remember, comrades, there must be no allegation in our plans. They shall be carried out to the day. Forward, comrades. Long live the windmill. Long live Animal Farm. All right, that's the end of chapter. Thank you for staying till the end of this chapter. I do hope you enjoyed it, and like I said at the beginning, if there's any words I mispronounce and you want me to, and if they might come out like later on in the book and you want me to say them correctly, just comment below and I will try to correct myself, like I said. And please like and subscribe. It would really help my channel grow. And I will be reading Reddit stories later today because I need a break from reading Animal Farm. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed the book, and I'll continue to read it next week, hopefully sooner than Sunday. Most likely I might read it around like Friday and Saturday. I know, not that much sooner, but I do my work pretty late. I procrastinate a lot. Please don't procrastinate like I do. Anyway, bye. Hope to see you next time.